Every organization must adapt to today's fast-changing and increasingly complex digital world, and most struggle miserably. The main reason? The cultural barriers to adopting new behaviors required to succeed in this hyper-agile landscape. Based on his experiences leading the digital transformation of a traditional print company and most recently leading Meta in South America, Joao shares 5 key insights that every business leader should prioritize in their digital transformation. Let's welcome Joao Adao on stage.
P.Speaers. It's the best I'm going to be able to do, so bear with me. How's everyone doing? Good. Good to see everyone. So I'm here to tell you a couple of things before I get started. The first is, today is the day with the fastest rate of change since we were born. Today is also the slowest pace of change for the rest of our lives. It's only going to get faster. Cycles are only going to get shorter. Our need to adapt is only going to get greater. So that has a lot of implications. On a personal level, how do we adjust to that as individuals? And then on an organizational level, even more so. Organizations that were designed for the world of a century ago, not just decades ago. And the organizations need to struggle with this increasing pace of change. That's what I'm going to talk to you about today. First of all, just a couple of minutes on my personal journey, which has in itself been a personal journey of transformation. So for the first 20 years of my 30 of experience in corporate culture, the first 20 were in traditional companies. Procter & Gamble, BCG, Avery Dennison, Liberty Media. And I say traditional because they were born before digital technology. It's not their fault. But what you see today, these organizations, all the traditional organizations that were born before digital technology, they're all running to adapt. Some more successfully than others, but they are all struggling to adapt. And then from 12 to 16, I had this beautiful experience of a digital transformation of Haibu, which is a British company that bought Yellow Pages businesses in lots of markets. And Yellow Pages, those of you who were old enough to remember, were those big yellow books with lots of phone numbers for the dentist and the plumber and all the small businesses that was the only way to find them. And in the mid-2010s, Google search started appearing and other search engines, and these businesses were no longer being found because people were no longer picking up the book. And so this company that had been a monopoly for several decades needed to adapt. And when I joined the company, it had roughly 12 to 18 months cash left. And nobody was going to lend it any more money because it was becoming obsolete. It was an industry that was dying. And so the challenge to transform it digitally made sense in a way, because although the business was dying, because search was going online and people were no longer going into the books, it had a big asset, which was channel access. It had hundreds of thousands of micro, small, and medium-sized businesses that they had a commercial relationship with and trust with. And those businesses usually did not have marketing departments. Think about it, small businesses. They're 1, 2, 10-person businesses. And so it made a lot of sense to capitalize on that relationship and transform the business into one that helped them in their marketing and their digital advertising new challenges. However, what I found in this personal digital transformation experience was it wasn't so much a product or a technology or a systems challenge. It was that too, but that was relatively easier to do. The difficult thing to do were the cultural barriers beneath the change. Because think about it, this is a company that had been a monopoly for 40, 50 years. That was the only place you could find those phone numbers. Long product cycles, right? The book came out once a year. So the speed of development and change was set up for that annual product life cycle. So no competition, long product life cycles, very inward focused, never thinking about the customer satisfaction. And all of a sudden, that needed to turn around 180 degrees. Needed to become externally focused, much faster paced, because whatever product you're offering today will change in a week or in a month. And it needed to be extremely customer focused. And today, I'm happy to say that this company is thriving, it's profitable, and it's helping hundreds of thousands of small businesses advertise online on places like Google and Facebook and Instagram. So that was a difficult but extremely enlightening experience. And from there, I jumped to Facebook, now called Meta, leading the several products that Facebook has in South America. And so what was interesting in my personal experience was this move from traditional to digital transformation to digital native. What I found underlying that whole story was how culture and the psychology and sociology of human beings is the key enabler for change and for digital transformation, which is what we're talking about specifically today. Now, what is culture? Many of you may have heard this statement by Peter Drucker, a management guru: culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what that means is you could have a beautiful strategy with amazing slides, very well thought through, competitive differentiation. If the culture is not aligned to that strategy, it's not going to happen. Culture has strategy for breakfast and lunch and dinner. Those are the add-ons that other management gurus came back and did. And I'm going to try to explain why that is. Why is culture so important? A lot of the work that I do today, since I've left Facebook 6 months ago, is with a consultancy, a culture consultancy called Excellent, that does tremendous work with clients, helping them on these digital transformation and general cultural transformation journeys. And they use this analogy, which I find very, very useful. It's the analogy of the iceberg, where a small percentage of the iceberg is visible above water, usually 5 to 10%, and 90% of the iceberg is underwater. So if you think about a culture, an organization, you could also think about the analogy of the things that the organization has, so the visible things, right? The annual report, the sales, the profit, the market share. Those things are visible, and they're the small portion of that organization. If you go slightly below the water, where it's a bit murky, you can still see it, but it starts getting a bit more difficult, there you have the things that the organization does. This is how they execute, how they communicate, how they coordinate, how they get things done, right? Because that's how those things become what they have above water. But if you go further down below the water, where it's harder to see, more difficult to talk about, is the B level, is how is the organization. And the B level is the mental models. It's the values and the beliefs. It's the operating system in IT terms. It's how things are done around here. It's the personality. If you think of the organization as a person, it's their personality. What is it they believe in, and how are things done because of that? Now here's the amazing thing. While the have is the most visible and the B is the least visible, the leverage is the other way around. Leverage means if you move the B level by 1 millimeter, it has a huge lever on the do and on the have. It's like if an airplane is leaving from Buenos Aires, Argentina, where I lived for a long time, and it's going to New York, but you move that route just 1 degree, it's not going to make it slightly off of New York. It's going to go to London. So that's the leverage. That's the analogy of the lever. And that's why in projects of culture transformation, this is what we focus on. We focus on the B level, on the mental models, and on the values and beliefs, because that's where the leverage is. And if you think about strategy and culture, going back to Peter Drucker's statement, strategy usually focuses more on the have. It's what products are we going to sell? How are we going to grow sales? How are we going to capture market share? Culture is all about that deep level of how are things done around here. It's more difficult to see. It's more difficult to talk about. But if you get that right, that's where the exponential effect comes at the top. And this beautiful statement is, what you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. This is another way of saying what Peter Drucker says. This is why culture has strategy for breakfast. Because you can say everything you want. You can say this is an organization where we are curious and humble and we listen to each other. But then if what you do is you just impose your own way of seeing things and you don't listen to anyone else, that is what I'm going to pay attention to. That's what the culture will be. So in this context, I'm going to share 5 insights from my experience, both in the digital transformation of Yellow Pages Haibu, as well as what I saw naturally at Facebook, because it's a company that was born in this environment. And there's a lot of similarities between the two. And I've tried to capture them into 5 key insights that everyone should follow. And I'm going to take you through each of the 5. For each of the 5, I'll illustrate a little bit of how I saw the insight at Facebook come to life. And then I'll try to explain the psychology behind it, or the sociology, or the anthropology a lot of times, because this is how human beings work and why this insight makes sense. So let's start with build a horizontal organization. That's the first insight. It's the one that's maybe least psychological. It's the one that's most structural. And first, I'll start with how this came to life at Facebook, what impressed me at Facebook about this insight. Every week, Mark Zuckerberg, this is the founder and CEO, has a Q&A session, questions and answer session, open to the 100,000 or so employees at the company. So the employees that are based in Menlo Park will go to this big room, just like this one, and every other employee around the world, in the offices around the world, can connect via online stream. And every employee can ask, so it starts with Mark Zuckerberg, sharing some thoughts, top of mind during that week, what's going on, product, whatever. If you went to Congress to testify or whatever's going on that week, he shares the hot item of the week. And then the rest of the session is Q&A. And any employee can ask the CEO of the company any question. And some of the questions, as you can imagine, are very strategic. What's the future of so-and-so, and what's the focus? And he'll answer what he wants or what he can. It's usually very open. And all the way to somebody who just started, a temporary worker who started that Monday and asks, hey, I've been surprised that whatever benefit is not as good as I thought, to the CEO of the company. And the reason he does this, and it's not very common in a lot of companies, I would say it's very rare, the reason he does this is because he wants to create a culture of psychological safety to speak up. And what he's sending is a very, very strong message. What you do speaks so loud, I can't hear what you're saying. So what he's doing is he's creating a space that everyone can ask a question. And that's a symbol for the rest of the organization that this is a place where we want people to speak up. The other thing, more close to my world, where I was responsible for several markets in South America, I led a leadership team, right? And there's some roles there. There are approximately 15 people that have different roles. And what I try to show here is the diversity of the seniority of the team. So with red, yellow, green showing more senior and less senior in the 2 dimensions of years of experience and how many direct reports each of these people had, you just see such a diverse makeup. So there were people with 25, 30 years experience on the leadership team, people with 5 to 10 years experience, people with big teams, people who maybe managed a sub-region within South America who had to have broad sales teams, and individual contributors on the leadership team who didn't manage anyone. Now, that is by design. Having that diversity in the leadership team is by design, because the company wants to make sure that we're hearing voices from the very senior people and the very junior people. And there's lots of different ways to do that. One is by design, by the organizational design. So we had that. The other way was, in the agenda itself, we would make sure to have items on the agenda where external people to the leadership team would come in every day, several times a day. They would share projects they were doing, they would share concerns they were having, and it was good on both sides. For the more junior people, it gives them exposure. Again, as Mark Zuckerberg's Q&A, it conveys psychological safety to speak up because I'm being invited to this leadership team meeting, and it very, very valuably, it gave the leadership team direct access to very junior people in the organization, a lot of them Generation Z, Gen Z, that are entering the marketplace, the workplace. Now, why was let's try to explain why you need to create a horizontal organization. The vertical organization has pretty much been the way large organizations have structured since the Industrial Revolution. And why was it useful for so long? First of all, because the leader had the greatest knowledge, right? The leader, the CEO, the general manager had been in business for 20, 30 years. He had seen everything, he or she had seen everything coming up through the ranks, and therefore, because the rate of change was not as big as it is now, they had seen everything, and they needed to be in a position to make the decisions and to tell everyone what to do. They knew more than anyone else. While the junior levels had the lowest knowledge. They hadn't really been around too long. They hadn't seen things, so they needed to be at the bottom to execute the orders from the top. And you needed a hierarchy to ensure control and minimize deviation, because you had this asynchronous level of experience and knowledge. You needed to be able to control the people executing by the people who knew. And the cost of that hierarchy was lower agility, but that wasn't as problematic, because as in the Yellow Pages example, the product life cycle was 1 year long, right? It takes us a year to launch the product again. A bit extreme, I know, but cars, you know, it used to take them 5 years to design and develop and launch a new car. So product life cycles were generally long. You could afford kind of the bureaucracy or the lack of agility. The vertical organization is obsolete. Some companies still use it, but they don't realize it's obsolete. And so it needs to become either horizontal, which just reduces the level of layers, or, as some companies are experimenting with even more innovative solutions, are with very autonomous pods that go out, and within certain limits, they have a lot of autonomy and accountability to do whatever they want. But either way, the vertical organization is obsolete. And I'll give you 3 reasons why it's obsolete. First of all, the leader's no longer the one who knows the most. Many times, he's the one that knows the least. Because what got the leader to where they were 20, 30 years of experience that, because things have changed so quickly, are no longer valid, and many times are a barrier for the leader to understand the new technologies and new habits. The leader needs to be closer. So you can't have all those layers. You can't hear people. That's why Mark Zuckerberg, opens up the stage for every employee once a week, at least. Obviously, there's other mechanisms, but you need to do that. And not only do you need to be closer, you need to be humble. And I'll talk more about that in the insight number 4. And Gen Z that are coming into the company at junior levels, very often, I would say almost always, depends on the industry, but almost always have more knowledge than the senior levels, because they were born into the digital technology. It's to them natural, while the senior levels are learning it. They're running to catch up, as I was talking about the traditional companies on the left. And lastly, the increasing speed of change, you can't afford anymore to have all those layers on top of the issue of how experience and knowledge has changed. So that's the first one. Build a horizontal organization. If you can't change the structure, if you can't build it flat because it doesn't depend on you, at least create the opportunities for mutual exposure between junior and senior. At least work on creating the psychological safety so that the young people who have the new technologies ingrained in the way they think, that they feel it's not only desired but safe, and they will do well by doing that. That's the first insight. Moving to the second is, be part of the problem. I'll share a couple of posters. Facebook has this wonderful cultural kind of habit of having culture posters along the wall. And I've seen them at a lot of other companies. At other companies, I've seen that employees don't really believe them. They feel it's a bit fake. It's like, oh, this is what the company wants to do, but it's not really. At Facebook, I found the exact opposite. Employees choose which poster they put in the office, close to their place, or they take it home. And there's a genuine belief, and it's genuine, it's real, right? So I'll share a couple of posters related to this insight of be part of the problem. One is focus on impact. It's actually one of the 5 core values at Facebook, now Meta. I keep saying Facebook, it's difficult to change the name for me. Focus on impact. Second is, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Right? Fear is one of the biggest barriers for human progress. So this is a constant challenge. What would you do if you weren't afraid? Okay, well, let me try that. Let me make the conscious effort to surpass my fear. Done is better than perfect. Again, another big barrier for progress is perfectionism. We think we're getting things right, but no, we're just slowing ourselves down. This morning in the Apple conversation, Ken was talking about the paralysis by analysis, right? It's the same thing. You're always looking for that incremental improvement. You're never going to get to perfect. Get going. Done is better than perfect. This one I love. Don't mistake motion for progress. In a lot of companies, you see a lot of people moving around. There's a lot going on, but are you progressing? Analyze what you're doing through that lens. Are you just moving, or are you progressing? It's similar to focus on impact, but it's a different angle. And my favorite one, and the one most related to the insight, is nothing at Facebook is somebody else's problem. It's just a mantra. Nothing at Facebook is somebody else's problem. So what's going on? How do we need to fix it? How can I contribute? So just imagine 100,000 people. If you could get everyone thinking this way, not 100% of the time, but if everyone tried to think this way, you would just have a lot less silo mentality, a lot less division, a lot more proactiveness. So that's how I've seen it at Facebook. So imagine you live in any large capital of the world, and you need to drive into the office for a 9 o'clock meeting or an 8 o'clock meeting, first thing in the morning. And you walk in late to the meeting. And someone says, "Why are you late?" What is the most common answer? Just yell it out. Traffic. I got stuff in traffic. Poor me. It's not my fault. It's the traffic's fault. Right? And we said it's major capital, any major capital of the world. Is there traffic every single morning? Yeah. However, we talk about the traffic. We don't talk about, oh, I hit snooze 3 times, or I set the alarm a bit too late, right? And here's the issue. If I say it's the traffic, tomorrow, the traffic is still going to be there. If I say I hit the snooze too many times, okay, tomorrow I'm going to hit it 1 less time. You see the difference? Depending on my answer, I'm either not able to do anything about it, or I am able to do something about it. But why do we say, we're intelligent human beings. Why do we say it's the traffic? Because the victim mental model we have inside of us. And it's a mental model that says, when things get difficult, I'm going to focus on external factors. Why? Because I feel safe and I feel innocent. And there's something that makes us feel good about feeling innocent. It's like a warm place. I'm innocent. I'm out of trouble. And it comes from our childhood, right? Since we were kids, it's better to be innocent, not be part of the problem. It's the milk fell. The carton just decided to jump out of my hand. It's not that I wasn't holding it right. It fell. So, okay, mom and dad won't get mad at me. Or she started it. No, he started it. Right? There's a safety. Anyone who has kids is smiling because this happens every single day. There's safety in not being part, not having responsibility. Now, here's the problem, is that was fine when we were children because we were getting away from getting yelled at or scolded. It's a problem when we still do it as adults, right? Because now when we do it as adults in a large organization, we say, oh, we're lucky the hold's on their side, right? We're in sales, and we're saying, oh, these product guys are useless. Well, guess what? If the product doesn't work, I'm not going to be able to sell anything. We're all in the same boat. Yet we don't realize that. And so when I say I'm late because of traffic, I am staying innocent, but I'm staying impotent. I can't do anything about the external factors. It's only when I shift my focus to internal factors that I can start doing something. And that's what we mean by be part of the problem. Be part of the problem. There's a hole on that side. How can I help you? I get nothing done by blaming someone else or saying he started, she started it. Now, if you think about the victim and protagonist mindset, it's a spectrum, it's a continuum, right? And all human beings live in this continuum every day. Several times a day, we go back and forth. Some things trigger our victim mentality, and in some cases, we're able to be conscious and steer our actions a bit more to the protagonist side. The protagonist mental model is the tendency, especially when things get challenging, to focusing on my ability to respond and what my choices are. Right? So the shift is from external factors to internal factors. And it doesn't mean that I accept responsibility. It just means that I choose the best way to respond. And I'll give you just a couple quick examples, a personal example and a work example. On the personal side, you've either heard this or you've said this, oh, I don't have time to go to the gym. That's a victim statement. The protagonist version of that is, I can choose to prioritize my time to better reflect the life I want. So for example, if I have a meeting every day after work and therefore I don't have the time to go to the gym, if I say the protagonist story to myself, if I tell myself that story, then I have possibilities. Maybe I can talk to my boss. Can we reschedule that meeting? Maybe I can talk to my boss and say, look, can I send somebody else to that meeting? But all those options, all those doors are closed the minute we say, I just don't have the time. I don't have the time, closes the opportunities. And then in work, we can think about so many stories across departments, right, that are so destructive. It's like, oh, marketing is useless. They have no idea what to do. They're all stupid. Game over. They're stupid. I can't do anything about it. I can't do anything about traffic. I can't do anything about marketing. How about if I say, I have not yet been able to convey their importance to us? There's got to be a way. Maybe I need to escalate. Maybe I need to build a relationship with them. There's got to be something else. Now, it's not my responsibility they're not doing what they're doing, but I have options that I wasn't considering when I think about myself in a victim standpoint. So that's to be part of the problem. The first step to create this culture, which is so empowering, is recognizing that we're all human beings. And as human beings, we have this spectrum within which we move. And so being aware of that. And in the moment when we react with that victim impulse, because it's in us since we were young, if we're aware of that, then we can make a pause and choose to respond in a protagonist way. And that's something, the good news is, that's something that can be learned. Let's move to the third one, which is have a hard conversation. I was very impressed. Some of you may recognize the face. It's Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook for, I think, 15 years. She just stepped down in August. Many people consider her to be the main responsible for the business that was Facebook. Facebook was the fastest company to reach 1 trillion market cap in history. Faster than Google, faster than Apple. They did it in a shorter amount of time. A lot of people say Sheryl Sandberg had that business vision. After spending many years at Google, she came over to Facebook. So when she has large meetings with many employees, she starts with the same question every single time. She says, how many of you have had a hard conversation this week? And half the room stands up, the other half stays seated. And she says, okay, if you're seated, think of a hard conversation you need to have and plan to have it the next week. People are a bit nervous. People standing up are all proud. And then she says, of those of you standing, how many of you had a conversation today? And I don't know, 3/4 of them sit down, just a few people are still standing. And she says, okay, those of you who sat down, think of a hard conversation you have not had today and plan on having it. So this is from the COO of Facebook, who's obviously a big driver of the business side, talking about conversations and about having a hard conversation. Now, I'll explain why she did this. At Axulent, this culture consultancy I do a lot of work with, we have this framework that says, if you look over time, sustainable success is achieved when a company manages to balance these three levels. It's called the I, we, it framework. So it is business results. Obviously, you need to deliver business results or else the market, either shareholders will sell you or a competitor will win. You need to deliver business results. over the long term. Maybe you can have a bad quarter, but eventually you need to come back. You need to have strong collaboration, strong trust, networks that rely on each other, or else it falls apart. You can't achieve business results if you don't have the we. And also, you need to have the I, which is the individual dimension, the fulfillment. Do people identify with the values? Do people feel that they can grow? Do people feel empowered to fulfill? And if you think, going back to Sheryl Sandberg, why does she say that? Because having hard conversation is critical for all three levels. If you think about the it, if we don't solve the issues, the things, the elephants in the room, the things nobody talks about, our competitors will. And many times they're very small, very lean, very agile competitors that very quickly start, eating on the edges and very quickly become our main competitor. So we need to solve the issues. We need to have the hard conversations, or else somebody else will. On the we level, many times we don't have the hard conversations because we want to preserve the relationships. It's actually the opposite. Think about it on a personal level, relationships, friendships, and on an organizational level. The strongest relationships are the ones that have the hard conversations. Think about it. Think about it in your own lives. So it's actually counterintuitive. I'm going to avoid the hard conversation to not create conflict. Well, no. If you have the hard conversations the right way, that relationship will become stronger because you're able to have the hard conversations. And then on the I level, if I go home every day feeling frustrated because there's all these issues, nobody's talking about it, I'm not going to talk about it. Eventually, you start tuning off. And you'll see, I'll show you later, Gen Z starts tuning off a lot sooner than every other generation. So you're going to have a problem on an individual level as well. Now, have you ever been in this meeting where someone says something and you think, wow, this is stupid. It's not going to work, right? Probably think of this last week. You had a meeting like this, right? Do you say that? No, you say, oh, that's interesting. Right? Have you ever? Yeah, you're recognizing that you have this double standard in your head. Well, guess what? You're not alone. Everyone does this, and this is a hard conversation that we're not going to have. That we're gonna paint a cosmetic layer on it, saying, "Oh, that's really interesting," but really, I think this is stupid. So everything's suffering. The it is hurting because I think we're not going to get good results. The we is hurting because obviously I'm not building trust, and I'm discouraged. I'm going home thinking, oh my God, this company's full of idiots, right? Now, why does this happen? There's a quadrilemma. It's worse than a dilemma, right? There's four things going on. First of all, we can't avoid our thoughts. This is, right, that's a stupid idea, it just appears in our head because of our prior experiences, because we've seen things similar that didn't work, or because we've been in another place. But whatever it is, it just shows up, right? It's what we call left-hand column. In our head, there's a left-hand column that we think, right-hand column that we say. We can't avoid it. It just shows up. We can't repress the thought. It just shows up. The second issue is, if we voice them literally, if I say, that's a stupid idea, that's probably not going to work, right? Because it creates defense mechanisms, because we're going to get in a fight. And so saying it the way I think about it doesn't work. But saying it cosmetically, saying, oh, that's interesting, also doesn't work, because we're not addressing the issue. And I'm being false. And I'm not happy with myself. So it doesn't work. And the worst of all is the energy leaks out. Because remember, what you do speaks louder than what you say. So you may say something, but there's the body language and the nonverbal communication. You just sense it. You sense when someone doesn't really mean what they're saying. So this is the quadrilemma. We have an issue. I can't just tell you have a stupid idea. I can't disguise it. And you're gonna be able to tell anyway. So there is a solution. Again, the good news of these 5 insights is these can be learned, right? We have these issues, these challenges, but they can all be learned. So if you think about authentic communication, which is hard conversations, there's really 3 layers. The cosmetic layer is what I say, right? The cosmetic, I want to make it sound good. Oh, that's really interesting. The reactive layer is what I think, but it's dangerous to say. That's a stupid idea. And then there's a core truth that's underneath that. The reason I say that's a stupid idea is because there's a core truth that I'm feeling is endangered. And the core truth is, I have a different point of view. And that's okay. And if you create, and think about all the way back to the Q&A, where Mark Zuckerberg creates psychological safety for people to speak up, in something as silly as just a question about whatever it is, that sends a message that it's okay to talk about anything. We don't need to be on the same page. We don't need to agree. Actually, we want to have different perspectives. I'm going to talk about that in a second. So again, the good news is this can be learned. And learning to have a hard conversation in a constructive way that's focused on, here's my point of view, I understand you have yours, here's mine, let's talk about them, and let's both be open to hear each other. That can be learned, those hard conversations can be learned. And the first time it's really difficult, but the second's a bit easier, the third is easier, the fourth is easier. That's why Sheryl Sandberg asks in every meeting, how many have you had today? Because if you have one or two every day, then it's just the way we do business. We talk about things that we need to talk about, and it's okay, and relationships are tighter, and we address the things that need to be addressed. The fourth is hold your convictions lightly. Really important one. If you go to the Facebook headquarters in Menlo Park in Silicon Valley, near San Francisco, you see the sign. Actually, the thumbs up now is the Meta kind of infinite symbol, but this is the big sign you see at the entrance of the headquarters. And if you look behind the sign, if you go around the back and you look behind the sign, you see Sun Microsystems. And that is the sign that Sun Microsystems had on this same campus before they went bankrupt, before they got pushed out of business. And so this was Mark Zuckerberg's way to tell everyone to stay humble, to say, look, we may have the biggest social network today, but you better stay humble, because Sun Microsystems was the best technology company in the world at one point. They went out of business. They don't exist anymore. Look at the back of this sign that used to be turned around, right? So there's, again, there's all these symbols. Culture is about a lot of things, but about symbols also. And this is a symbol to stay humble, because you don't keep anything forever. And actually, Facebook is having trouble. The share price has dropped, like many other companies. But this humility is important, and it's always been there as part of the culture. And why is humility so vital? For two different reasons. One we already talked about is if the vertical organization is obsolete and the leader needs to be humble and needs to be closer and needs to create space, humility is critical, right? Leaders that are still attached to their ego, to being right, to being the smartest person in the room, they're going to have a really hard time, because the world just isn't the way it was when they gained their experience. It's changed so much since then. The other reason that I want to compliment now is teams with cognitive diversity achieve better results. This is scientifically proven. This is Maxine Williams, Chief Diversity Officer at Facebook. So in addition to just the fact that we need to treat every human being with the same rights and with the same equality, because it's a human rights prerogative, on top of that, we will achieve better results with cognitive diversity. So if you think about a leadership team of 10 people, if they're all white men that went to the same university and had the same experience, they're going to achieve worse results than if you have 10 people with extremely different backgrounds that had different experiences, different education, different upbringing, different family types, different cultures, different countries. However, so while that's true scientifically in terms of business results, you're only going to achieve that if you have humility around that room, right? Because if not, you're going to have 10 egos trying to prove that their different perspective is the right one. You need to have different perspective, but you need to have humility to be able to extract the value of the different perspectives. Now, here's a second mental model that I wanted to show you. Remember culture is about mental models, and remember the victim-protagonist mental model is core to being able to being part of the problem, being part of the solution. Here's a second mental model. The knower mental model is one that says, I am perfectly rational. I analyze objectively, and my conclusion is right. However, others are not really perfectly rational, right? Mathematically, it doesn't make sense. There's surveys about driving skills all over the world, and they all come up with the same kind of conclusion. 80% of people think they drive really well, and they say 80% of the others drive really poorly. It doesn't work mathematically, right? If 80% of the others drive poorly, it can't be that when they respond about themselves, they say, no, I drive really well. And this has to be with the knower mental model, that we have it embedded in us. We're programmed this way. We're programmed to think that what we see is objectively correct. The problem is, we don't see things as they are. There is no such thing as objective reality. We see things as we are because we have these glasses that have been influenced by our childhood, how our parents brought us up, our experiences, what school we went to, what our companies, what country we lived in. So we think we're being objective, but not only are we analyzing a different way because of our glasses and our different experiences, but even the data points that we pick on which to analyze are different. It's proven scientifically. So if we realize that things are not objectively one way, it's a little bit easier to let go of our ego and our need to be right. The opposite, again, this is another spectrum, another continuum between knower and learner that we all have in our brains, and we're constantly moving back and forth. And the more aware we are, the more we can move. I'm going to go this way because I'm in front of you. The more we can move to the right. The more we can be aware and conscious that this is happening, and we can move to the right. What does the learner say on the opposite side of the spectrum? The learner says, my perspective is limited. So I have a perspective. I'm going to share it. It's valuable, but it's limited. It's mine. It's my experience. I'll offer it up, and then I'll be curious, and I'll be humble to listen to yours. And then let's debate both. And maybe sometimes I'll be right. Maybe sometimes you'll be right. It's okay. It doesn't matter, because I'm focusing on progress and on being effective and on getting the most out of this discussion, because I recognize that we all have different perspectives, and that's part of the value. Now, in organizations where the culture is, to see who's right, they spend all the time trying to prove they're right. In organizations where humility is valued and curiosity is valued, the focus is on progress, is on bringing in all the different perspectives. What do we do with all this? In a lot of literature, this is called the growth mindset. Many of you may have heard the growth mindset. It's about that. Golden rule that I love is don't get mad, get curious. Carl Jung used to say, look, if something triggers you and gets you mad, gets you angry, gets you frustrated, that's really good input. So pause for a second. Instead of responding and getting mad, get curious. Ask for more information. Say, wow, what you just said doesn't make any sense to me. Can you tell me more? Because for you it makes sense, obviously, because you're seeing it through your glasses. Doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means I have a different perspective. So can you tell me more? And you move a culture one conversation at a time. So if you can have a few more conversations that are curious and humble, then you're moving a culture from ego-based, wanting to be right, to humble and curious. The Beatles went to Decca Records and presented their music. The executives there said, we don't like their sound. Guitar groups are on their way out. Right? He missed something because he was attached to his knower mindset. And this phrase I love to conclude this insight: in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. Right? So the knowers, the ego, the one that's trying to show you he's right, he'll be beautifully equipped to live in a world that no longer exists, because the world's going to keep going. And only the learned, only the humble, only the curious will be able to adjust. Moving to the last insight, which is believe in something. Again, a couple of posters at Facebook. Build social value. It's one of the 5 core values. Facebook, it's embedded in the culture to want to contribute. Right? It's difficult at the scale of the company with over 3 billion users around the world. It's difficult, but I'm here to tell you it is embedded in the culture. Everyone wants to do good. Ship love. A lot of programming technology companies talk about shipping code. This is about, I need 1 more minute. This is about shipping love instead of code. Give more than you take, and eventually everything connects, right? Because there's a belief that everything is connected in the world. Simon Sinek, in a very famous TED Talk, said, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. So the value of purpose, and start with why. And Yvon Chouinard, you may have heard of him, founder and CEO of Patagonia. I went to see him speak once, and he said, when I ask our employees what business we're in, and they answer clothing, I say, no, we're in the business of saving the planet. Clothing is just the way we're helping to do that. So that's purpose. Everything else just mixes around that. And And guess what? It's only going to get worse because Generation Z, they work to live rather than live to work, right? 56% would quit a job that prevented them from enjoying their lives. 40% would rather be unemployed than being at a job they don't like, almost twice that of older generations. And if you go, let me jump forward to the conclusion real quick and wrap it up. For Generation Zs, for companies, you need to think about values alignment for Generation Z, both as an employee and as a consumer. You see from a Deloitte study, 77% of Gen Z find it important to work at organizations with the same values as theirs. It's no longer okay to work at a company that doesn't believe what I believe in. And 89% as consumers choose to buy brands that are socially and environmentally conscious, NIT, which is a Gen Z research group. So it's not only good for business to start with why, it's only increasingly more so because Gen Z is forcing organizations to stay honest with their values. So these are the 5 insights. Good news is, as I said a couple times, all these can be learned. The work I'm doing now since I left Facebook is basically helping organizations transform their cultures with a large focus on digital transformation. But really, it's all, you saw it, a lot of this is psychology, sociology. And really, it's based on a 2+2 framework. It's 2 mindsets. You saw the 2 mindsets here, the protagonist and the learner mindset, and 2 effective collaboration tools. The authentic communication is at the core of everything. If we're not talking about things, then somebody else is talking about them. And impeccable coordination is tools to coordinate across complex organizations. Thanks very much. I think we have time for a conversation. Thank you.